Hi, my name's Wendy. I'm editor at Sunflower Publishing. I do book reviews, I'm a book blogger, and I also host creative writing retreats in Italy. This afternoon, this evening actually, because I've just got a nice glass of wine here. This evening, I'm going to have a lovely author chat to Jessica Gilmore. A quick introduction to Jessica. Um, Jessica has written over 30 published books. After starting her career with Waterstones, she spent several years in marketing before moving into fundraising, first for an environmental charity and then a university, before fulfilling a lifelong ambition and working in the arts. She recently moved to the Chilterns from York, where she mostly complains about her commute, dog walks, pretends not to be addicted to reality television, and she writes. Jessica and I first crossed paths when I was asked to be on a book blog tour in the summer because Jessica had written a novel called Love at First Sight, which was published by Orion in July. So I hope she is going to walk through the doors any moment now. And before she does, I'll have a quick swig of wine. So here we are. I'm so excited to be finally meeting Jessica because, as I said, our paths crossed earlier in the summer when you published your latest book, Love at First Sight. And
Right.
I got involved because I review books set in Italy.
Yeah, that's right. And this book was set in Sicily and in Florence, as well as London and Stockholm. So it takes us all over Europe basically, but the bulk of the book is set in Italy.
Can we start with the book? Is that all right? Just
Of
talk
course.
about the book. Then can we go back in time? Because I know you have written many other books and published other books. So if we talk about this one, why Italy? What do you know about Italy then?
What do I know about Italy? So I think my love affair with Italy started, like many people of my age, when I first watched Room with a View back when I was an impressionable teenager. I hadn't been to Italy at that point. I'm not sure. Well, I did classics at university and at school, so I knew a lot about ancient Italy and the Romans, but not so much about present day Italy. And then Room with a View was just one of those very impactful films. It was so romantic, so lush, so clever. I still use lines from it occasionally if I'm out and about. I just loved it. And so then I really, really, wanted to go to Italy. It was high on my bucket list. And when I first got together with my husband, our first holiday abroad together was to Sorrento. So that would have been many, many, many years ago. And we actually honeymooned in Florence. So
Wow.
yeah, so I wouldn't say I've been as extensively as I'd like to. I certainly don't know the country as well as I'd like to, but it's somewhere that I've been with my family many times, and I've seen lots of parts of it. But there are many parts to explore, and I'm happy to
Mm.
be doing that in the next.
I think that shows. I mean, I do live in Italy, so I always feel I look for a touch of authenticity when I read a book set in Italy. And I felt I had that. I had no idea how many times you'd been or, things that you described. And for the readers who I hope will read the book, a lot of this is set in Sicily because the main character falls in love. Yeah, falls in love. I'm not going to put a spoiler in there. Falls in love with a gentleman, an Italian gentleman, whose family has a vineyard on on the slopes of Mount Etna.
That's right.
And when you were describing the vineyard and you were describing Italy and the way of life, I definitely felt you had experienced part of this, some of this, if not all of this.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not all of it. So I haven't actually been to Sicily. My publishers wanted a book set there. And it's not the first time I've had to set a book. As you said before, I've written many books in places I've not been to. Unfortunately, the role of an author isn't maybe quite as glamorous or as lucrative as we'd like to imagine. And if I had the opportunity to go on research trips to everywhere I wrote
Yeah,
about, I wouldn't
yeah,
make any
absolutely.
money. But we're very lucky in sort of this day and age in that you can research really quite extensively. So if I'm writing about somewhere I haven't been to, I will tend to use a Lonely Planet. So I will have
Yeah,
something sort of basic by my side that I will use all the time and mark up. But of course, blogs, Google Maps,
yeah.
I spent a lot of time on aspirational, gorgeous hotel sites. I certainly did that for the Vineyard. My Google search history was, and then of course all the adverts for a long time afterwards were sending me to Sicily, and I would have gone this summer actually because I loved where I wrote about so much. But some friends were coming over from New Zealand, so we ended up in Croatia instead. But Sicily is now very, very high on my next travel list to that region because I
Yeah.
just
Oh,
find it so
well, yeah.
expensive.
I did. I really did. I didn't know what to expect when I read it. And obviously with the title, I'm just thinking, oh, this is going to be a lovely, sweet holiday romance. Not too complicated. Don't have to think about this too much. Pick it up, and I felt, well, you can tell from the review, I felt that there were so many more layers going on here and themes as well. And you do mention Room with a View and Ian Forster. And what I was wondering about really was that Room with a View, for anyone that's not seen it, I think most people have, it is this novel of self-discovery, which is experienced by, a very intelligent and sensitive woman. Was that your starting point then? Let me get the woman right.
Yes, it always is for me. So the other books I write are mostly for Mills and Boon, and I write for a line for Mills and Boon, which is very heroine centered. And my starting point is always the heroine and her backstory. So once
Right.
they've got an idea of who she is and what's she what she where her life is right now and where it maybe ideally would be if certain things weren't in her way, then I've got the story. And then of course finding sort of the hero and the story to go with that is a foil to that. I was asked by my publisher to set a book in Sicily, and they wanted, again, try not to give any spoilers, but they wanted a certain setup. And it's not a setup that I would usually write for Mills and Boon. It's definitely not a traditional romance setup. So I kind of had to think about that for a while, how I would approach it. But it was all centered on Nora. And once I'd kind of got her clear in my head and I thought about where she'd come from, why this setup would work on her, why
Right.
why she'd be susceptible to the things she's susceptible to, and why she would be able to maybe kind of go along with some maybe a little bit be a bit self-deluded in certain ways, and I
Yeah.
had to make that believable. So
Yeah.
who was she? So I wanted to kind of, so that's where she came from. I needed her to be someone who was quite lonely,
Mm.
although with a great circle of friends,
Mm.
and somebody who was maybe always yearning for something. That was
Yeah.
my starting point, someone who was always searching. And then I don't think, possibly until sometimes when you read reviews, you think, oh, maybe I did do that. I don't think I was sort of consciously trying to give her any kind of Lucy Honeychurch tendencies apart from for my own amusement when she was in Florence. But actually, I guess there are a few parallels, not that I've ever sort of compare
Yeah,
myself
it's
with the
not.
imposter, but a few parallels that come through. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
that with writing is
Yeah.
subconscious. A lot of that subtext isn't necessarily actually what a writer is setting out to do, but maybe as you revise and revise a book, it comes in.
Yeah. I mean, the lovely thing is that, and I do really quite like a book that has this parallel thing going on. And as we get into well, obviously, it starts about her mum and her mum's travels when she was backpacking, and who her mum met and how she fell in love with this person. And you've got that going on. And I don't know, I think that's clever because we know that her mother fell in love, just wonderfully in love, like we would all hope to.
Yeah.
Regrettably, it was a little short-lived, but then we want Nora, don't we, to have that same experience of love. And you're gunning for her right from the word go. Because you do think, well, if she has a little bit of what her mum experienced, this is going to be, a really nice story.
Yeah.
And then it kind of unravels a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because actually, how realistic is that? And there's a bit, again, without, it's hard without, again, giving spoilers, but when one of her friends would have says, but it wasn't that real because it was so short-lived that it was never tested. So it's easy to have a great romance
Yeah,
when real life doesn't have to intrude on it. It's an
absolutely.
extended holiday romance. So that's kind of why when I wrote to her grandparents as well, who are never on the page, they were there in memories and in postcards. That's real and solid because they were married for a very long time. They loved each other very much, but they had some problems that they had to overcome. And so it's how do you get from that first infatuation to
Yeah,
something that's tempered and tested, and which in the end is what real love is, as opposed to romantic love. The two are very different. But when you're young and in your 20s and you're searching, nobody wants a sort of solidity of somebody putting the washing away without being asked. That doesn't sound very interesting, but actually 30 years on, that suddenly becomes a lot
when
more
she,
romantic.
I think, is it when she's talking to Anna, her one of her friends, and I mean, I don't know where you've got this from, and whether this is based on, your own experience of life. And her friend says, a love story is a life together. Do you know what that really made me think? A love story is a life together, not just their eyes met across a crowded room. There's more to it than that. And I loved that line. And that came from her friend, which in turn, I think, led to the realization by Nora, well, yeah, my friend's right, actually. She's absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about writing this book is the fact that her friends do play such a pivotal part, and they're so different and so close to her. And I had a lot of fun coming up with the different characters, and they sort of changed a little bit over time, obviously, but they were all as distinct to me, even though they kind of show up at the beginning and they show up at the end and are there in text messages. As Nora, very, very early on, when you write for Mills and Boon, you only have 50,000 words, and they're dual viewpoints. You always have the hero and the heroine. So you've literally got 25,000 words for your heroine. You do not have time to give them. There's just no space on the page for a close-knit friendship group. So it was really nice to be able to write that and to really make them come alive as well and give them all their own personalities and their own roles, as opposed to just being Nora's
And
confidence.
is all of this from your imagination, or are some bits of it plucked from your own life experiences?
Well, I mean, all from my imagination to a certain extent. I'm not in my 20s. I certainly don't have a lovely house in Hampstead Heath, although, how nice would that be? My mother's still alive and did not go backpacking. So the fiction parts are all fiction, and that's the whole joy of being a writer is to come up with very, very different scenarios. In terms of having friends that are good friends who are there for you, I'd hope that most of us have that. Maybe not that sort of solid TV small circle of friends and nobody else, but a decent friendship group. And one of the things that's always been really important to me as a romance writer is I I would consider myself to be, a feminist, and I've raised a daughter, and I've never wanted to write heroines whose only goal is marriage without any thought of what goes beyond that, whose only fulfillment is from meeting a man. I've always wanted my heroines to get to a place where they would feel that they can tackle anything that life brings them on their own through that relationship and through what they learn about themselves through that relationship, before I feel that they should go and have that happy ending. So there's always a point when I need them to grow up, or to overcome whatever's been holding them back, and they're going to be fine on their own if they have to be. They'd rather be with this other person, but they are fine on their own. And once I've got them to that place, I can do that, because I think that's a really important message, because in the past, one of the many criticisms unfairly leveled at romance novels is that it's only about, if you don't have a relationship, there's no future for you, and I don't believe that's true. So that's always where I'm trying to get to, and for the man as well. I don't have these sort of perfect, hopefully on paper, Mr. Darcy figures, although Mr. Darcy, Paul as well, does lots of good things, but I want them to feel real.
Yeah, the job that she has, tell everybody the job that Nora has. And I wanted to know, had you seen this on TV? Where did you come up with this job that she has?
It kind of came to me as a little bit of inspiration. So Nora is an air hunter. So her job is to hunt down recipients of wills. And I wanted her to have a job where she could work from home most of the time, because she's quite isolated, and where she does a lot of research because she's looking for her father. That's one of the other plot lines that go through the book. And she's a little bit, rather than being starry-eyed about romance and true love, although definitely she is, she's also starry-eyed about family because she's on her own. And so reconciling families for her is really important. Being an air hunter allows her to do that. And I came to it. There's a TV series in the UK.
There is, isn't there? Yes, I know.
Which I've actually never seen, but I had watched when I was doing the research for this. I thought, what do they actually what is this job?
One would always hope to be the recipient of the phone call that says, are you, did you know?
Absolutely. It's sort of lottery winning, but even more sort of surprising. And actually someone I know, her husband retrained as an air hunter. We've had some conversations a couple of times. So I guess it was there in the back of my mind that this was a job that people did, that it needed training. It's not easy,
sure.
And all the rest of it. And it just felt like something just different enough. And
it is.
It's very easy when you write romance to make your heroines all do the same kind of jobs, work in publishing or whatever. And it was just like, no, I want to be a bit more, I want to give her something a bit different that I've not seen before on the page.
Okay. So that's the book, which is really lovely. Has your publisher asked for any more in Italy, or is there another one on the horizon?
So I'm writing 2 books at the moment. I'm writing a longer form book again. So these are 80,000-90,000 words. And I'm still kind of playing around with what that's going to be. But this one, if it's a book I want it to be, I'll be set in Massachusetts rather than Italy, which is somewhere I know reasonably well. But I'm also writing a Mills and Boon, so I've still been writing for those. And the one I'm writing for them right now, I'm in Venice with mentally with that. So
I mean, I have to say, Italy is the perfect venue, destination for anything, historical fiction, history, absolutely anything. And as a book blogger who just does books set in Italy, you can imagine, I mean, it's every genre that comes my way, really.
It is. And I know I've read so many books set in Italy over the years, whether it's a Donna Leon ones and you've got a bit of crime, or which ones were on TV? The Zen books, I enjoyed those as well. Loads of romance set in Italy, so really amazing literary fiction, because you've got it all, haven't you? All these different landscapes, all the history, and again, a classical education. So I really do love a Roman set book when I can get my hands on them. But for a romance writer, when you've got a beautiful population with beautiful food and beautiful landscapes, it's just
worth writing about.
It's so worth writing about. It's hard to go wrong with Italy.
It's quite bizarre, but I did feel a sense of reality with this because, as I said, quite bizarrely, we have some friends, an English lady with her Italian husband, who have a vineyard on the slopes of Etna. So
how nice. I'll have to go visit them someday.
I'll send you the link. You can have, I think they do accommodation now, and it's quite sort of Airbnb, but you can, do the sampling and the tasting. So I know that's true, that there are vineyards on the slopes of Etna. So I did feel that was real. So can we? Oh, and that was published by Orion in July, as we've said. Can we go back then in time to you?
Okay.
When did you first think that that's what you want to do, to write?
So I first thought I was first aware that writing was something that people could actually do, as opposed to be this sort of historic thing that privileged people could do. Back when I was in my early 20s, and I spent a year as an au pair in Connecticut, which is why I know New England very well. And the people I au paired for, they had an amazing library of books, lots and lots of books by people I'd never heard of. And it was a great year for me reading wise. But interspersed amongst all these mostly very literary books were some Regency romances, which felt very out of place in this house. And it was because Audrey, who I au paired for, her cousin was Loretta Chase, who is a really well-known Regency writer and who redefined the Regency genre, actually. There would be no Bridgerton if it wasn't for Loretta. She's an amazing writer. Lord of Scoundrels was a genre-defining modern Regency romance novel book, and she wrote it. So I just thought, oh my goodness. And she said, oh, that's my cousin Loretta. She's done these various jobs in her life, and now she's got a family, and she writes books. I was like, oh, okay, so that's something people can do. And then I came back to the UK. I got a job in Waterstones, moved into legal publishing, and then moved into more of a marketing career. But at the back of my head, there was always this maybe I could do that. But I was also quite scared to start in case I couldn't do it, and then that dream would be gone. And so it wasn't until my daughter was born and she was sort of 2 or 3 that I started to try. And for a long time, I tried writing Regency romance, and I wasn't very good at it. I was just writing really bad Georgette Heyer pastiches, which would have been fun for me, but not for anybody else. And then in 2010, I think it was, Mills and Boon ran a writing competition. And so I entered one of my terrible Regency romances into that. And I didn't get anywhere in it. But what I did do was make a lot of aspiring writing friends, which is something I hadn't had up to then. So suddenly I had a circle of friends who were also trying to write romance. And I ended up on a course in York, where I lived at the time, run by a woman called Pam Hartshorn, who wrote Mills and Boon as Jessica Hart. She doesn't write for them anymore, but the 60 books she wrote for Mills and Boon are some of the best Mills and Boon romances that have ever been written. Her Ordinary Girl in a Tiara is if you ever want to sort of know what a Mills and Boon could and should be, that's the book to read.
Right.
And I was very lucky to do a 10-week course on writing commercial fiction with Pam, who then became my friend. And through that, I started a contemporary Mills and Boon book, because that was her genre. And I joined the Romantic Novelists Association and entered it into their New Writers Scheme. So I had a deadline. Turns out that's the most important thing for me. I had a deadline. I had a different genre to try. I had a new online community of writing friends, and those things all together sort of were the alchemy I needed to get a book finished. And I sent it into the New Writers Scheme, and they said, actually, this might work. And it got sent on to Mills and Boon. That wasn't we didn't go straight into a happy ending at that point. The book came back to me with some revisions. I'd started a second book. I wanted to get that finished and write before I tackled the revisions. I was a bit nervous about them. So I finished that book, I rewrote it. And about 2 years later, I had 2 full manuscripts in with Mills and Boon, and then I just didn't hear anything for months and months. And I ended up speaking to one of the editors at a writing conference, and sort of saying, oh, I've got these 2 books in with you. They were both requested, but they've been there for 6 months. I haven't heard anything. And she said, oh, I'll look into it. And a month later, I got a call and they said, we want to take both. So suddenly I had a publishing contract, 2 books written, 2 books accepted. The first was set in Cornwall. That's The Return of Mrs. Jones. And the second was my first Italian set romance, which is called Summer with the Millionaire. And it was set all around Tuscany with a spoilt British heiress and an Italian entrepreneur who she'd known all her life. So that was my first setting a book outside the UK and writing an Italian hero. So I started that quite early.
How did you feel about that then? I mean, at that point, I mean, you know the publishing world. I know the publishing world. It can happen overnight, sort of. It can happen 20, 30 years later.
Yeah.
There's just, what are the ingredients then? I mean, was it the fact that it was Italy? Was it, I mean, obviously it was well written. It was what they wanted. It fit their own kind of profile. What were the ingredients then that you felt?
So I think there are lots of ingredients actually. So there's always an element of luck, and there's an
Right,
element of luck throughout the entire writing process, and the publishing process. I know lots of really talented writers with a lot of longevity in their careers who never quite break through, no matter how amazing their books are. Uh, so yes, I think for me is I'd done the research in the end. I'd
right,
gone on the courses, I'd read the books, I'd broken down, I understood what they were looking for. A
right.
lot of people think they can write romance, especially more than any other genre. They think it's easy. You just need pretty girl, handsome boy, they don't like each other, or there's an obstacle, happy ending. And through the research I did, especially the course that Pam did, I learned a lot about conflict, how and pace and character. And of course, like I say, both books were rewritten quite extensively. It wasn't as if I just wrote the book and it got accepted, and that's what I wanted to happen. But I had to learn how to revise and edit and take notes and all those very painful processes. So I think that was it. I think the fact that it did take from that first competition in 2010, and then I got the call 3 years later, and the first book was published 2014, so just over 10 years ago.
Mhm,
So it was sort of 3 years of hard graft at that point.
mhm.
I had, one child and a part-time job, but I wrote everywhere. So that's the other thing. It's application and it's getting the book finished,
Yeah,
because you wouldn't
yeah.
believe how many people say, oh, I've always wanted to write, but I don't have time, or they fiddle around with 3 chapters. I certainly was guilty of that for many years, wanting perfection in those 3 chapters, as opposed to just getting the book finished and then going back. Um, but I learned to just write wherever I was. I had, because I had one child, she was very active. I wanted her to be busy. So I
Mm,
wrote outside gym clubs and by the side of
mm.
swimming pools. And for many years, she took dance very seriously until she was 18. So for many, many years, in the cafes at dance studios, or the public library next door, or wherever she was, often in the car with a blanket around my shoulders. I learned to
Just
use
right
those
thing.
moments to write. And so rather than say I don't have time, I use those bits of time where you could be on your phone,
Rising.
or having a coffee with someone to write.
Would you say that Mills and Boon has changed much over the years? I mean, we use the term very glibly, don't we? Oh, it's very Mills and Boon.
Mm.
And yet, in your experience now, have they obviously have a different audience now? How have they adapted themselves as publishers in today's modern single mom kind of career world?
I think they've always actually been like that. It's
Okay.
just perception, because it was often women writing for women.
Right.
It's always been an easy way to put down an industry. Mills and Boon were probably the first publisher to have sex on the page before others did. They had career women where other books generally didn't, and that's often forgotten. I think when people look back at their
Yeah.
history, they're seen as being very reactive, whereas actually I think they've always been quite trailblazing. Um,
Right.
and now I can't think there's any thing that I would want to write that I couldn't write.
Right.
Um,
Right.
we have a lot of freedom. There are a lot of different lines. If you write for certain, because they have different lines, books and those lines need to adhere to reader expectation. I think that's really important. So if someone's picking up a book in the one of the sexier categories and there is no sex on the page, they're going to be disappointed, because that's the expectation. Some of the lines promise a lot of glamour. The idea is that you are living on this almost dynasty-esque world. And if you then set it in a cafe in a small town in Buckinghamshire, like where I live now, that's not going to deliver on that kind of international glamour promise unless you get
No.
swept out. So you've got to be aware of that. But I think that's the same in any genre. If you're writing crime and there's no crime in the book, people are going to feel a bit shortchanged
Of
when
course.
they get to the end of it. I think, well, yeah, they're amazing. And to be able to condense an entire story into 50,000 words and deliver that sort of promise of sort of serotonin hit of a happy ever after, it's a lot trickier than certainly I realized when I started. And some of the, like I say, something like some of the authors, Liz Fielding, Jessica Hart, are just absolute little gems. What 50,000 words of absolute pure romance perfection, which is
If
great.
you hadn't have got somewhere with Mills and Boon, would you have just continued to pursue the writing? Would you have thought, oh, let's see if I can get an agent. This is what I want to do. How determined were you?
That's a really good question. And I think I was lucky in that it happened for me actually relatively early. It wasn't the first book that I'd submitted, but it was the first time I'd finished a book and worked really hard on it. I don't know. It's really hard to look back and say because I was working at the time as well. I was part-time, but I was working. I work full-time now. I have a full-time job and a big commute, and writing fits into the side of that. Um, yeah, I genuinely don't know the answer to that
Don't
question.
know
I know
how it
lots of
would have.
people that did try for a long time for Mills and Boon and it never worked for them, but they write for different publishers now. So there are lots of people who have carried on. And maybe I would have written something, ended up writing something completely different.
Yeah,
Because genres have changed so much in that time. The internet
yeah.
and digital publishing and Amazon have changed everything. So yeah, it's a
I
good
suppose,
question.
well, the other thing I was going to say is, would you have gone down the self-publishing route, do you think? I mean,
Wow.
you obviously know lots of people in the industry. It's
Mm,
massive. I think sometimes the jury's still out on self-publishing. Um, it has opened the door to a certain extent for people that do want to write, even though it's opened the door for many people who can't write.
mm.
It, I don't know
Yeah,
how to feel
absolutely.
about it.
I think for a long time I would have said no because I needed that external validation. I needed someone to say, yes, this is worth being published. I needed to break through those gatekeepers. And I think possibly I still do. I'm not sure I even now would trust. I'd have to pay a lot of money for a really good editor.
Right.
But having said that, I have been in talks with people who run their self-publishing work like a business. They pay
Mm.
those good editors, they pay the good copy editors, they pay really good cover artists. And some people are making the kind of money that I don't think many traditionally published authors are.
No, it's
And that's,
yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? It
I say,
really is. I mean, we've had a lot of people that have come through the writing retreats that we have in Italy, and some people are just there because they want to see Italy and have a nice time and maybe just indulge themselves with a bit of writing. But it's also nice to think that probably quite a lot of the people who've come on the writing retreats have gone back home, carried on writing, paid an editor,
mm,
and they're now at the point where they feel they have a really, really good product ready to go. So I think, well, my job is done then, because all I wanted to do is to give you the inspiration and the
yeah,
motivation, really. And Adele Parks sort of, when she was talking to us last year at the writing retreat, and everyone said, so what is it you need? What do you need to be a success? And she said, you really need to have quite a tough skin,
mhm,
really. You do need to have a really good product, and you really need a little bit of luck with you, really. Would you agree with that? Is there anything else that you would add to that?
I would agree with all of those things. You need a good product. You do need a tough skin, and you also need to understand it's not personal. That's where I think because it feels so personal. If
Yeah.
someone doesn't like your book, or they pick things out in it feels like a personal attack. And it's
Mm.
like all these things, it's easier to believe the bad reviews than it is the good. I've done some talks to students in New York before, and I usually would have a slide that would have reviews for the same book, and the reviews would say, this is the worst Tosh I've ever read, couldn't finish it, and this is the best book I've ever read, this is wonderful. And I would say neither of these things are probably actually true. I doubt it's the best book they've ever read, but I also doubt it's the worst book they've ever read. And it's easy to get that sense of perspective on a book that's 2 or 3 years old, which is, I use one of the earlier books of my career for this particular thing. When it's newly out, it's too raw. I wouldn't be able to be that pragmatic about it. Um, but and like I say, luck, as I said to you, I know people who are really at the top of the game when it comes to talent, who have long publishing careers behind them, and yet for whatever reason have never broken through, and they've written multiple genres in the end under multiple names for multiple publishers to make a living. And each of those genres and each of those books are worthy of bestseller lists. And yet, for whatever reason, they've never got there. You need your publisher to not just publish you, but to market you. And if that doesn't happen, it takes a huge amount of luck for you to then
to do that.
to make, as I said, I write full time. I mean, I work full time. I write on the sides because I am 10 years in and I've written over 30 books, and I could only afford to do this if I was had independent money, or my husband earned so much I didn't need to work. There is no way that we could survive on my writing money, even if I write 3 books a year. It's not an industry for the faint-hearted. You have to want to do reasons beyond
really
money
determined
and success, because if that's what you're fixated on, you'll be lucky not to be
well,
disappointed.
actually, you've answered both questions, actually.
Okay, sorry about that.
No. The question that I always want to know really is, what does literary success mean to you? Money, fame, or both?
Oh, I mean, my ideal world. So I'm very lucky in that I have a really great job. My day-to-day job is in an iconic institution. I have, I run a department. I'm very lucky with the job I have. I work hard at it, but I am. I would still one day like to be living by the sea and working full time, writing full time. Not just I love my job. That is my ultimate goal. So I don't think I need fame, but to be able to earn enough to be able to
do this all
do
the
that
time.
would be the where I'd like to end up. And then I'd probably miss my office and my day-to-day job. But yes, to be able to get up, walk the dogs on the beach, come back, write, and have the
Sounds
luxury
lovely.
of wallowing in my books. Because the problem with writing on the train and then doing what I did all day, so I write every morning on my commute, and then on a Saturday I bring it all together. I edit those words from my commute and I add to them to mean that I meet my weekly goal. I think the bit I miss in that is that time to really slip into the skin of my characters, to have the daydreaming time. That's the luxury that combining the two doesn't give me, and I would really love that. That's what I'm aiming for, is time to really be a bit more innovative, I think, to really try to push myself.
When you started writing, did you think, I mean, we've just touched on reviews, good reviews, bad reviews, whether you read them or not. Did you think how, what's the word, how transparent in a way an author has to be, because you open yourself up to judgments? And as you've said, if you did get I haven't seen any bad reviews for you, but I know people that get them, and I can't imagine how personal you take it. Did you realize when you started writing that you would open yourself up, really just, this is me?
Yeah, probably not at the very beginning. I'm trying to remember when Goodreads became so ubiquitous, because pre-Amazon and Goodreads, you probably wouldn't see those reviews unless people took the trouble to write to your publisher. And I think back in those days, people would write to publishers in a way that they genuinely would never do now, because why would they need to? Goodreads, NetGalley, Amazon, they do give people a chance to comment in a very throwaway way that they probably wouldn't if they were speaking to you face to face. Which I personally would never do. If I write it, I usually only review if I've read it on NetGalley, and even then, even if I don't like the book, I would try a little bit as if I'm doing the RNA reports, to be constructive into what didn't work.
I would never, ever, ever do a bad review. I would try my best to find something in in a book, because I know how long it takes people to write this. It's their life. They pour their heart and soul into a book. And I can't imagine what that feeling is like when you've spent a year and a half on a book and then someone says, well, that was rubbish. I mean, that would just be devastating to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also so subjective, because if people people
Yeah.
often sort of pull things out in a book that you maybe didn't see yourself, or you think, well, I didn't mean that. But if but it's valid. The way I write, some people find it too slow, and that's up to them. If they
Fine. Yeah,
don't
that's
want that sort
fine.
of slightly more introspective, more emotional immersion that I think my books have, then it's not going to work for them, and I can't take that personally. But like I say, I think it's easier on a book once a book's kind of hit 2 years, and I've got a couple more out there, and I'm not feeling quite so emotionally attached to it, because then I can find it a bit more amusing. But if it's a book that's just come out, then
Yeah.
every bad review is almost like oh yeah, I knew I was no good. It's almost like a validation of your own feelings about yourself. Do you know what I mean? Where it's a good review, you're like, oh, how nice, and then it's. I don't ever take those to heart the same way, which is ridiculous. I mean, I should do.
When this book came out, published by Orion, as we've said, in July, and was it Rachel's Random Resources that I can't remember who organised? So was that the publisher that suggested the book blog tour?
Yes, that's
Oh,
right.
they do that. Did you get up, first thing in the morning to just see what those reviews were?
Yeah, I did. And it's sort of it's a really weird one when a book comes out, because I think before you are published, you might have this idea that on publishing day it will be very glamorous, and there'll be flowers and champagne and speeches. And of course, that's just not true. It kind of slips out, and unless you're Ian Rankin, and when there's probably is always a party with champagne and flowers and reviews, for most people it's just another day. I was actually working away. I was back in Massachusetts working the day job. So and also it came out on election day. So I was in America. It was Independence Day in America. It was election day. I was working sort of 18-hour days on this tour. So it was a very odd publishing day, this one, for me. I got sent flowers by my publisher. My husband sent me the picture of the flowers, which is nice of him.
A big event, isn't it? Publication day. Really.
Yes, with the blog tour, you do tend to follow it just to see if people get what you were trying to get. It's not really a case of someone saying, oh, I enjoyed this, but that's great. I write romance. It's to be read by the side of a pool or by the
Yes.
side of a fire. I'm not trying to win any prizes. I just want people to read it and escape. And if people get that, but also get a bit, I think your review did this really beautifully, understand some of the layering that I want to put in there for those who want to reach that, then that's a job well done for me. And if people don't get the layering but just enjoy the surfaceness of it, that's absolutely great too, because it is about escaping.
Advice for aspiring writers. What would be a pearl of wisdom for anybody thinking, I want to do this too?
I think there's three. One is read your genre, understand what the market is. Two is find the time to write, no matter how busy you are. As I said, if you've got small kids, write around them, write when you're waiting for them, or write on your train. That's what I do now. Or there's always half an hour, write at your lunch break, and finish the book.
Right.
Get it finished, because the best part of writing for me, first drafts are a slog and painful, and you always get sort of a third. Well, I always get a third in and think, this isn't going to work. This is it. This is the one that's tripped me up. The best bit is when you've got those words, however awful they are, and you can go back and start crafting your book.
Yes, revising it a bit.
It's so much fun. I love revise. I could revise forever, because I can always tinker with the sentence and see how things can be better, and rewriting. But you need that first clunky, nasty, dirty first draft to be able to do that. So get that done. Don't keep going back to it. Get it written, and then you can have fun with it.
Good advice. When you were in Waterstones, surrounded by books, which sounds, I remember working in a library when I was at school, and I'm surrounded by all these wonderful names, Was that a bit of a turning point, do you think? Just working in a bookshop thinking, well, look at all these books, maybe one day I'll see my name on a cover.
Maybe it was. I think what I mostly got out of Waterstones was, I met my husband there. I met some of my closest.
Oh, right.
That was
In that case, it was
I got some
worth
really
it.
nice things personally from it. Was being around people who love books as much as I did, and talking about books all the time and just being
Yeah.
immersed in them. And I, when I have my fantasy life by the sea, often I'm also running a small bookshop in that fantasy. I need to make money because it's really hard to make a
A
living.
nice little indie bookshop by the sea. That sounds
Exactly,
absolutely perfect.
living the rom-com dream. Yeah, I think, but I always wanted to run a romance section, and at that point, there are now in some Waterstones, but then there wasn't at that time, and I
Yeah.
think romance was kind of hidden away. But it was the start of the sort of first chick lit era. That's how long ago I was working at Waterstones. Bridget Jones had come out, and Lisa Jewell. I think you mentioned Adele Parks earlier. Ginny Colgan. They were beginning to bring out their sort of Bridget Jones-esque Jill Mansell. So it was the first kind of great dawning of a kind of modern romance at that
I think
point.
Adele sort of classifies herself as contemporary women's fiction. These genres, every few weeks there's some more added to Amazon's list, as people are kind of branching out more. Contemporary literature, contemporary fiction. And I think, well, yeah, that's quite nice. It kind of, keeps the door open for anything in there in a way, doesn't it?
It does, and I love books that are sort of very straight romances. Like I say, some of my Mills and Boon fellow writers, and which are completely straight romance. But I also really, really love books that have that contemporary adult fiction with a romantic element. One of my favorite writers is Christian Higgins, who's a US writer. She sets a lot of books on Cape Cod, which I also really love because I love the Cape. But she's really good at that the romance, and as she's written, as her career has developed, it's gone much more from more of a straight romance to a contemporary adult book with romance and lots of different themes running through. And I think that's probably where I'd like to sort of steer my career, to that kind of more I think there's an element of that in Love at First Sight and the other book I wrote for Orion, Love on the Island, but that sort of multi-familial, generational, beautiful setting, family secrets with romance. And a really central part of that, happy endings are important to me because there's enough misery in this world without reading about them. I like things to be sorted out and tidied up at the end.
Are you romantic as a person?
Do you know what? I don't think I am. Which is really
Isn't
odd.
that
I don't think I
strange? Isn't that strange?
It is. Maybe that's because I put it all into the books. I am much more, I think, about my husband cooks for me because I'm on the train and he works from home. So I come home at 7:30 and my dinner is usually, if it's not on the table, it's close to being. And that, I would much rather have that than weekly flowers.
Right. My husband's cooking for me tonight.
Oh,
So,
nice.
my last question really is, tell me, please, your favorite childhood book.
Oh my goodness, that's a really tough one because there are so many, and there's about 3, 4 that I want to say. If I had to pick just one, it'd be Anne of Green Gables,
Oh, right.
which I mean, I love the whole series, but Anne of Green Gables is exactly that. Exactly what I was saying. It's about generations. It's about personal growth.
Yeah.
It's funny, obviously, very, very funny. It's one of those books that you get more from each time you read it. You read it as a child, it's all about Anne, and then you get older, and there's Marilla. It's got the circle of friends. The romance is a thread that runs through it. It has some really sad moments. You can't go wrong with Anne. It's got everything, and it's set in this beautiful place,
Mm.
and the setting is part of the book. So I
I
think,
think sometimes when you do read books as things at school, I mean, for me, Laurie Lee, Cider with Rosie, and this kind of Anne of Green Gables was another. They do kind of stay with you as well, really, don't they? Which is really nice. But can I thank you so much for this? I really, really appreciate it.
oh, you're
For
very welcome.
anybody that wants to buy the book, it's available on Amazon and other places.
All
Yeah,
the usual places,
all
yes.
the places. We said it's published by Orion. Have you got your a website?
Not an up-to-date one. That's a problem with being a full-time worker and a writer.
Yeah,
The marketing bits do tend to slide down the
right,
scale.
right.
It's something my daughter's now a student and I'm paying her rent, so I should make her do my website for me.
Well, you're on
So thank
Insta,
you.
aren't you? You're definitely on Insta.
I'm on
On,
Instagram, yeah, Y
yeah,
Rose Red. So I
yeah.
don't know
Okay.
why.
So
It's one of
people
those.
can find you if they want to
Yeah, and please do.
connect with you. And I think, authors need to connect with their readers, maybe with in this day and age. I think a lot of readers want to see who the authors are, where they go on their holiday and how they live their life. And whether or not you want to or not sometimes, but I do think that there is a certain amount of visibility that's kind of expected that goes with the territory, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. No, no, I am on Instagram and it's an open Instagram for that very reason.
Yeah,
I'm very
of
happy for
course.
people to follow me and I would, love it when people tell me what they think about the book. So
Yeah.
if you have read it, do tag me, good or bad.
Well, I really, really enjoyed it. It was lovely. And if there is another one in Italy that comes my way on a book blog tour, and I get notified, I'd be really excited to read it.
Lovely. Well, if it happens, I will definitely let you know.
Lovely. Thank you so much for this. And thank you for your time. And how old is your daughter now?
21.
She's
Just
21.
turned 21, yeah. So she's at university living her
What does
best
she
life.
think? What does she think about mom being a writer?
Slightly mortified and doesn't read my books. However, ends do. So she has definitely come. In fact, in at the back of Love at First Sight, I've mentioned some of her friends, which she asked me to, because they do read my books and they enjoyed it. So
Wow.
yeah,
Oh, that's
her
really
generation is definitely
nice.
an embracing romance book generation, which is really nice, but not her own mother's. And I guess I understand that.
Jessica, thank you so much for the interview. Absolutely wonderful. And have a great week. And hopefully our paths will cross again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Ciao.
Bye.